We're at Aromatic Spa, which is where Dr. Amit is based. He is the author of Heal Your Body, Cure Your Mind, available on his website and at Healthy You. Is that right? So we were talking about mental health, and right. So now I want us to talk a little bit about trauma. First, how does trauma show up? What are the different ways that we could be experiencing trauma, but we don't even recognize it as such?
So trauma for me is a very sad thing, I think, because in my practice I see a lot of people who have been through abuse during early childhood, and they don't realize they were affected, or it's affecting their behavior or their mindset or their self-esteem in their adult life. You know, a lot of people are ignorant as to the effects of trauma. Trauma could be, you know, seeing your parents fighting, seeing your mom or your dad being beaten up, you know, your parents divorcing, being abandoned. It could be financial stress, physical abuse, sexual abuse, being bullied at school. All these things make us scared, or make us angry, or make us defensive, or lose our confidence, our self-esteem, you know, or attract the wrong type of person in our life. You know, some people keep on going for the wrong type of person, the abusive person, because that's what their mom or dad went with, and they felt that was normal, or that's what I'm familiar with, and they have a very hard time leaving an abusive relationship. So for me, it's very important to deal with childhood trauma as well as adulthood trauma to help set people free. Yeah, because people have a choice. Like, they can, once they heal the trauma, they feel stronger or more able to leave negative situations.
So I'm curious to know of the people who come to you with, whether it's you know, somatic pains or aches or you know, issues, or otherwise. How many of those, once you start the treatment, do you recognize as this is stemming from childhood trauma?
Good question. So recently I'm seeing a lot of gastric issues, like ulcers and GERD, gastroesophageal reflux, where you just get heartburn. So I'll treat it naturopathically with changing the diet and, you know, healing the gut and all that, which we'll talk about later. At the same time, I often ask, when did this problem start? You know, they'll say, oh, it started 5 years ago. What happened 5 years ago? Right? They'll say, gosh, you know, my business was failing, or my wife left me, or my children, he broke his leg, or something bad happened. And they don't realize that event triggered a stress response in their body, which keeps them tense unknowingly. And tension, of course, and stress will shift your metabolism. It changes things. So you'll see a lot of stressed people get ulcers, right? So we know emotions affect the body, right? And so because I'm a psychotherapist, I'll also work with healing their trauma, using special techniques, which we'll talk about as well. Because it's important not only to use supplements and all that all the time, you've got to heal the root cause. And if the root cause is an emotional trauma, then you need to heal that as well as changing the diet. Super important. Otherwise, you're just dependent on supplements all the time.
Why is it that we could experience a trauma, recognize it as, you know, difficult, wrong, unfair, but we might still come back to it, or still continue to do the same things that take us back to that? So, for example, you know, you touched on, you could have been bullied in school, you end up being a bully later on, or you watched your father be abusive, you end up being abusive, you watched, you know, you say a parent of yours be cheated on and you end up cheating. Why do we, even though we recognize it as, oh, this is not right, we go back to that?
Okay, so depending on the school of psychotherapy or knowledge you come from, there's a familiarity that we're addicted to, right? It's normal. It's like when we're young and we see something in the environment, some people associate that disturbance as love, because that's our familiarity. We get attached to that. Some people, like, they don't have enough resources or support as children to overcome the trauma. So they remain fearful and defensive. And so to protect their own weakness, they can end up bullying other people, right? Because they feel they need to dominate all the time because they're insecure.
Because it's fear.
It's fear-based.
Yeah.
Most of bullying is fear-based.
Yeah.
Abusive relationships, I've often seen a loyalty issue. So I practice something called family constellations therapy, where we see a child might have a loyalty towards the parent, saying, I can never be happier than the parent because I'll feel guilty. So I must match the level where my parents reached.
Oh.
You know, if I'm more successful than my parent, or if I'm in a better relationship than my parent,
Yeah.
there's a strange innate guilt that comes up for some people.
Yeah.
So subconsciously, they just sabotage good relationships, or they end up in just, they don't know how to leave a negative relationship. Because if my mom put up with this, it's normal for me to do this as well.
Right. Because what gives you the right to be
Exactly.
in a better space?
In a better space.
Oh
Yeah,
my
it's
gosh.
sad.
Yeah, that
It's
is
really
sad.
sad.
So in your book, you touch a little bit about your experience with mental health issues. Can you take us through that and why you found it important to speak about it?
Whew, yeah, it's a sensitive topic for me right now. So I went through a lot of anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts as well as a teenager, even late 20s. You know, I grew up in boarding school, so I had a lot of abandonment issues. And then I was bullied in school as well. I was the littlest kid in town. And then, of course, I drank a lot of milk, ate a lot of sugar. You know, I was eating Cinnabons and Coca-Cola every day. No idea that this was affecting my mental health. So I had a very unhealthy lifestyle as well. And also combine that with, you know, relationship breakups, so the trauma part and the health part, the food part, everything was having an effect on my mental health. So I struggled a lot with, you know, negative thinking, suicidal thoughts, self-doubt. All these things plagued my mind, you know. And luckily, after studying naturopathic medicine, I learned about the gut and the liver and diet and all that. And slowly I started feeling better. And then studying psychotherapy, I realized the value of healing trauma as well. So I didn't realize all these events in my childhood were affecting my sense of strength, my confidence. And after healing these things in my past, I could be more comfortable with people. I could love better in relationships. I could talk publicly. So I teach around the world now because I've healed a lot of timidity issues or self-confidence issues. And it's a work in progress. You know, we're never fully complete. You know, it's a lifelong journey, healing our past and our belief systems. Because a trauma or a negative experience will create a belief for a person, meaning they'll start thinking, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not liked anymore. So because of these negative beliefs they start compensating who they are. They're not as free. They're not themselves.
Right.
They think people will reject them.
Yeah.
Or they do too much to please the boyfriend or the girlfriend
Or the boss.
or the boss, right? And they overcompensate, and then the partner doesn't appreciate them. They're like, oh gosh, you know, I can leave this person.
Yeah.
Because they were not loved as children fully, by their parents or in boarding school or whatever it is.
Wow. Okay. So you've touched a little on physical trauma and emotional trauma. Which one plays a bigger role? Which one is more difficult to overcome if someone has experienced physical abuse or trauma or emotional?
I think both.
Okay.
Because even in physical abuse, there's an emotional aspect to it.
True.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm not safe anymore.
Yeah.
I don't deserve a safe
Right,
space. You know,
right.
all these things then they affect mental health, because what happens is these traumas are stored in what we call the limbic system, the limbic brain, the primitive brain. So meaning it's stored in our memory. And when that happens, basically there's a subconscious stress going on in our body. And that subconscious stress is actually pushing your adrenal glands. Remember we talked about the adrenal glands?
Right, yeah.
That's subconscious stress, so that memory from the past, as well as present day stress. Cell phones, deadlines, financial things, marital issues, all those things are pushing our adrenal glands to work and work and work.
Yeah.
So your adrenal glands are actually wiped out from stress, traumatic memory, as well as your diet.
Right.
So people who have been through more trauma in their childhood are more prone to mental health issues than a person who had a healthy childhood, for example. Right?
So that's depression, anxiety.
Depression, anxiety, OCD, schizophrenia, all these
Right.
things,
Yeah.
right? They are a result of a poor diet,
Yeah.
of present day stress, as well as traumatic memories. and they can all be healed.
Right.
That's the beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
so I encourage people not to feel ashamed of their mental health status or the negative thoughts they're having. You know, talk to a counselor, change your diet, eat healthy, take some herbs. You know, we have some of the best herbalists in the world in Kenya. It's just been sidelined a lot because there was a lot of stigma around herbal medicine. People thought it was negative and we don't want to experiment with it, it's causing problems.
Yeah.
But really, in India, it's $1 billion industry. The Ayurvedic medicine industry is huge. And it would be amazing for Kenya to invest in herbal medicine, bring up the knowledge back into the communities, back into the hospitals, right? And integrate it back into the normal medical system so that we can all work together, yeah, support the herbalists who have been sidelined and can hardly make a living, but they have such important knowledge that might be lost if we don't work with them soon enough, yeah? And improve the health of society with this ancient knowledge.
How early can you experience trauma? Can you experience it as an unborn child?
Yes, you can.
Is it because you're technically right in your mother's not digestive, like you're in
her womb?
you know, in part of her body?
Body.
How does it work?
Okay, so again, depending on the school of thought or belief you come from, certain people believe we're energetic beings, so we sense things. So a mom's fear is felt by the child, so they feel uncomfortable. That's the energetic explanation or the holistic explanation. Scientifically, what happens is when your mother experiences trauma, and they've seen that people, children born of victims of the Holocaust, 9/11 attack, yeah, babies who were in the wombs at that time, they're more prone to anxiety and depression. Yeah, so the scientific explanation is when you're in the womb and your mom experiences something, her chemicals change, her cortisol levels go up, her adrenaline goes up, and these chemical changes then affect the baby's biochemistry. And remember, your body is developing as a baby, so, and is developing based on what your mom is feeding it, including all the biochemistry, all the cortisol, all the adrenaline. So she's designing the nervous system of the child, yeah, based on her experiences and the way she's dealing with life and the foods she's eating.
Yeah. So even the foods she's eating, so it's not just trauma that could, you know, if she's experiencing like physical or emotional trauma,
Yeah.
but the foods she's eating could affect the child's, well, how the child's mental health in the future.
Develops, yeah, because if she's eating a lot of inflammatory foods, inflammation is causing damage.
Right.
So we're causing damage to the brain, the baby's brain. And we're actually causing more addictive behaviors in the baby's brain as well. Because they're used to having that from the mom's blood, from the umbilical cord. And so as they grow up, they're going to crave similar things, possibly.
So, Dr. Amit, I'm curious to know if everything that we're talking about, you know, what you're eating and the trauma, if it only affects the emotional part of the brain, or if it affects the part that deals with memory, our logic, our impulse, you know, responses. Does it just affect our mood or?
Everything. It affects everything. Your learning capabilities, your thinking, your intelligence. So like, you know, children born of drug addicts, for example, could have learning difficulties or defects. So remember, any toxins, you see your baby is being created out of cells and nutrients, and you need healthy nutrients to make the cells and to make the baby. So if you're eating the wrong foods, you have too much inflammation, or the mom is so traumatized that her cortisol levels are off and her hormones are off because of stress and trauma, then what the baby will be getting, yeah, will be compensated, right? And some parents who don't eat the right foods, you know, in old traditions they used to recommend certain foods for pregnant women. And now it's like people crave sugar and all that, and they're feeding the baby a lot of sugar, right? So we need to go back to our traditions and see what were the mothers feeding, feeding themselves, or the grandmothers feeding the pregnant women. There's so many beautiful herbs out there, and just eating healthy, nutritious foods with enough B vitamins. So a lot of women, when they're pregnant, they'll be recommended a multivitamin for pregnancy because the baby needs those nutrients for development as well.